am speaking with Philip Rafshoon now. Philip, thank you so much for being here. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here today.
I'm glad that you're here as well. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. I mean, you and I have we've talked about it for a while. We've met at the Midtown Alliance in Atlanta several times now.
You have indeed,
and kept saying, "Okay, we're gonna do this. We're gonna do this," and we're doing this.
Yes. Yes. It just goes to show you have to just sometimes say, "Hey, let's get this on the calendar."
Exactly. Just pin it down, and we are now doing that. But I mean, I'm thrilled, and I will reveal many reasons why I'm thrilled in just a moment. But tell the listeners and slash viewers a little bit about yourself first of all. Right now, of course, you're the director of member engagement for Midtown Alliance, right?
I am. I'm still in Midtown, which is one place I didn't think I'd be for this long a period of time. But born in New York, my family moved to Atlanta when I was 6 years old. Grew up here. Went to Georgia Tech for school. Spent 10 years in the computer industry after that, starting with NCR, and then opened Outwrite Bookstore and Coffee House in Midtown in 1993. I ran that for almost 20 years, owned and operated, and then went to work for the Decatur Book Festival for a little while. And for the past 9 years, I've been working at Midtown Alliance.
Amazing. Great journey there. And I mean, I have to say, and you touched on it there in the middle of your sort of brief bio about your life, why I'm primarily very excited to talk to you, because I feel like some of the first times, because I grew up, really on the outskirts of Metro Atlanta, and in a more conservative place where there wasn't really anywhere I could go publicly and just be myself. So some of my earliest memories as late teens, early 20s, getting to actually just kind of be myself and not even necessarily, I almost said let loose and be myself, but I wasn't causing riots at the bookstore or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, you were. I just
maybe that was me. No, but no, I mean, it was just such a great spot, and one of the very first where I could actually felt like I could in public be myself. So first of all, thank you for that opportunity for myself and so many others, I'm sure. And so what really made you or inspired you to open up a gay-friendly bookstore and coffee house in Midtown Atlanta, first of all?
That's a good question. I had traveled while I was, working around the country and went a lot of cities, and every place that I went, there was an LGBTQ bookstore. I guess we called them gay bookstores back at the time. And, every city had them. Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Boston, Miami, even Orlando. And every major city had one except for Atlanta. And these were places where you could go in, find books about our lives, talk with people who shared your experience. And it was open during the daytime. It wasn't a bar. Now, I've been going to bars and clubs since I guess I can say this on camera, since I was 15 years old, and enjoyed them and still enjoy them. But there was nothing to do in the daytime in Atlanta as an out, or even as not an out person where you could connect with the gay community. There was no internet then, and I thought, why in the heck don't we have this in Atlanta?
And that was a very good question that hadn't been, why hadn't been done since then. And I mean, you really found, I think, the perfect spot, because it was right at the corner of 10th and Piedmont, where now, of course, the famous Rainbow Crosswalk lives. And I mean, it's just right in the heart of what was and still in many ways very much is a very thriving LGBTQ plus community.
Right. But it wasn't a very easy journey to get there. In fact, we opened at a different spot originally. And back in the early 90s, somebody had put an ad in the Southern Voice, which was the precursor to Georgia Voice, asking if there's interest in opening a lesbian gay bookstore. And I said, yeah, I'd be interested. And also, if there's investment opportunities, let me know. So I met with a guy, Gary Kaupman. He was very excited. I was excited about being involved. But he came to me about a year later and said, this is not going to happen. if you want to do it, here's the business plan I put together. Take it and run with it. And then it sat on my shelf for about 2 years, and I was frustrated with work. And I was like, why don't I just open a store? So, but it was a hard journey to get it open. We did not have landlords that wanted to rent with us. I would go in and say, I'm opening a lesbian gay bookstore, and they would say, no way in my property. But what I realized was they had no concept of what it was. They assumed that it was a pornography store. And, you know, I could have gotten angry about it, but I realized that they had no reference on anything besides that. Even though we'd have some erotica in there, there was a lot more to it. And so I kind of, you know, reformatted how I was asking and said, I'm opening a bookstore. These are the resources. This is what do I have? And then later, by the way, it happens to be an LGBTQ bookstore. And by that time they had said, you've got the space, and they couldn't really back down. So it took a while to get there. We opened in the Midtown Promenade, which is where the Trader Joe's is now. And we were there for almost 3 years, and then moved to the amazing space at the corner of Piedmont 10.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better spot there. And I wasn't even aware that it had opened up in a different space before. But, you know, that just kind of goes to show you sometimes the journey gets you to where you need to be. And the journey can be very unpredictable, right? I mean, and along those lines, I mean, what kind of challenges along the way as a gay entrepreneur did you face in this space? I mean, you already talked about getting the space to begin with was a challenge, and you found a way to sort of reverse engineer their thinking on that.
Yeah.
But what other kind of, as you went along, what other challenges maybe creeped up?
Well, just to get open there were more challenges in getting the funding because I needed investors, and the excuse I got all the time was Atlanta will not support something like this. There's people that go to the bars, there's people that go to politics. They're not the same. And I said, I go to all this stuff and I see the same people everywhere. The same people that you see at 2 a.m. at Backstreet were the same people that would go to the fundraisers or the political events or the marches. I said, this community, I've been here a while. I know there's people that would support it. So that was a challenge. So, but once we got open, you know, every day was a different adventures. There was, you know, security challenges. When we moved to Piedmont and 10th, we were the most visible LGBTQ business in the Southeast, if not the country. We had a big window with rainbow flags on it, which in 1996 wasn't as, you know, common as you see today. Amazingly, we had very few threats, very few rocks through the window, but we did have some. As any small business, staffing is always a challenge, training them. We never had a ton of money at the bookstore, so everything was done on a shoestring, but as, you know, as good gays, we know how to make it look a lot better than that. So that was fun. But, you know, there were challenges every day in running a small business, but we had so much support. People would come out of their way to support us. They would speak of us to their friends. They would invite us to other places in the city to do book signings. We would go with the authors to people's homes, to other venues. There was so much support because people really loved the idea that we had this very visible store at one of the most prominent intersections in town.
Yeah, which was just great. And, you know, I mean, speaking of the clientele, as you were, you know, trying to get the business established and people just weren't quite buying that there was actual clientele for this, you said, you know, I go to all these things. Well, you know, that was sort of me back in the day too. I remember my friends and I, we would like meet at Outwrite, and then, you know, later in the night we would find ourselves up the street at, say, Burkhart's. Burkhart's was our place because we loved the drag shows. So we would go to Burkhart's a lot, and so that was us too. So yeah, I mean, it was, the clientele definitely was there. And so, you know, as you sort of look back on the time there at Outwrite and at, you know, 10th and Piedmont especially, you know, you talked about being so visible, not only probably the most visible shop at the time in the city, but in the country perhaps. What were maybe some of the big sort of milestones along the way that you sort of remember and look back on that were, you know, big positives for you as you, you know, had that store up and going?
Yeah, well, I mean, the opening was a big positive. We had so many people that would walk in and and say, wow, I didn't know this was here. Like even on day one, we exceeded our sales expectations. In the first store, we opened in 93. And then in 95, we were able to have a book signing with Greg Louganis, who was a champion Olympic swimmer. And we got the thing booked. And then we realized a few days after that he was going to make a major announcement a week before the event. And that was the announcement that he was HIV positive. And he was the biggest celebrity who had ever admitted to that. I mean, remember, this is 1995. And we had 1,000 people come to our book signing. They waited from 7 a.m. till I think 3 p.m. By the end of the day, we had the Atlanta Journal-Constitution there. We were on the cover the next day. And at 6 p.m., we still had people in the store. We had all 4 TV stations in the store live covering at 2, 5, 11, and 46. And at that point, that was a milestone. It took us to be able to get other events. It put us on the map. It brought us a lot more clientele. Moving to the new store in 96 was an amazing accomplishment. We had a party that people were just like, wow, I can't believe you did this on the corner. It was designed so well. The guy I was dating, who is my husband now, was our designer and creative director. They were shocked on that. And then even towards the end of the run in 2008, we had a really big signing with RuPaul. It was right when he started the drag race. And from that point on, we just took it to the next level of publicity and getting the word out and making the store beautiful. And we had 4 more years where the publishers would just absolutely love what they do. And they'd send us the biggest authors like Chelsea Handler, Gregory Maguire. Every event from that point became just phenomenal and kept us in business for the next 4 years.
That's amazing because, I mean, obviously just RuPaul was already a big star at that time, but, I mean, obviously the stardom has grown exponentially in the last several years with the Drag Race show. But I mean, like talking about an LGBTQ plus icon who got their start in Atlanta was amazing. And I actually went to RuPaul had an event down at the Tabernacle, I believe.
Yeah, I heard that was great.
It was fantastic. And actually, I was there. It's so funny. There was one of the drag queens from this season who was cast on the spot at that event.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So we got to see that happen and then watch the show and got to see her on the show. So it was great.
The nice thing is we could have those giant book signings. And then the next day there would be something like Queering Shakespeare, which had, 10 people that came, or a musician or an artist. And it just became a lot of fun those last few years, just making it all about the events and getting people in the neighborhood bookstore.
I love that. Well, and as times do, they tend to change. The only thing constant is change, after all. What kind of was it that initially sort of, made you think it might be time to hang things up? I mean, obviously the advent of online shopping took a toll on a lot of brick and mortar retail. Bookstores, I think, were hit especially hard by that. Was that sort of maybe the catalyst that led to the eventual closure?
I would say so. I think in the 90s, it was always boom, 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 boom. And then around the turn of the century in 2000, we started seeing that, we weren't making as much money as we had been. And the online shopping took away from us. It changes when phones came in, I think people stopped reading as many books. And then, it became that as we became more accepted, people could live anywhere. They still came to support Outright, but when we had started, Midtown was a lot more LGBTQ people lived in Midtown. And as the neighborhood gentrified and grew, there still were gay people here. There still are, but it wasn't as much a percent of the mix. And the rent went up. So it all kind of took a toll. We got into too much debt, but because we were serving so many people and because we were doing these events that were becoming bigger and bigger and bigger every year, we thought we had a chance to get out of it.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, it was because it was just such an iconic spot. I mean, you kept it going, obviously, and you kept the faith there. Um, but you know, I mean, what it's especially in, well, let's sort of, I guess, go through it chronologically with the on the financial side. Like, how did you approach financial planning for the business? Kind of in the beginning, you talked about getting funding, you know, for the business and all of that. But then as you went forward, how did your approach to maybe the financial planning and that aspect of the business have to sort of change and evolve?
Well, it did. I kept, we kept working on the books and trying to find ways to get more money out of it. And, as things changed in the early part of the 2000s, we kept thinking, what can we do to get the sales up? And they did go up, and we worked on staffing. But it just was never enough. I had to borrow a substantial amount of money, and it didn't work. One of the things that I didn't do early enough was put out an SOS, support our community. We're at risk of going out of business. And when we finally did that in 2011, it got so much attention that, I realized if I had done it a few years before, we might have had a chance. Now, things have changed. The rents have gone up there even more. There's nothing we could have done to save the store. And in fact, the last 2 years, we made a profit and were able to get the debt down. But, it's, if I could do it over again, I think once I started taking on the debt, I would have brought in some experienced advisors to really just push that direction. But, we were having such a good time, and we were serving so many people that we just kept going. That we had Pride in late 2011, and it was very interesting because I was doing a live interview in the middle of the parade with Dennis O'Hare, who was on WABE, and he said, "Well, what we already put up the Save Our Store support. We're having a sale." And he said, "Well, what would you do if you had to close the store?" He said, "What?" I'm like, "It's not happening." He said, "But what would you do personally if you had?" And I just looked at him and I couldn't answer. And he said, "Philip, I've never been in an interview where somebody couldn't answer a question." And the interesting thing is I hadn't really thought about it. I'm a very positive person. There were so many people around that said, "You could make it. We're going to help." But I had to take a look and say, start taking the steps to see what the next journey was going to be.
Yeah. And I'm sure it was extremely difficult because that was your, as you said, almost 20 years of your life there. And much of it at that spot at the corner of 10th and Piedmont. And, I mean, after that, obviously difficult decision was made, what did you do? Like, what did you end up doing after that? Now here several years later, I'm going to ask you that same question that you were asked on WABE back in the day. What did you do?
I would say that it was difficult from that point on. It was difficult to close it. It was one of the hardest things I've done, but not the hardest. And it was easier than I feared. And, I think what stopped me from doing it was the fear of what would happen to the community, what would happen to me, what would I do? And the fear was what held me back from moving forward with taking the next step. So my message would be, as always, don't let fear choose your path. So we had a sort of organized closing. I spent 6 months just trying to pick up the pieces, filling in odd jobs, talking to friends, crying. But I ended up getting a nice offer with the Decatur Book Festival, which that time was the largest independent book festival in the country. It was a part-time job, meaning we worked 9 months there, and it really helped me get back on my feet, staying in the book community, expanding the knowledge of literature and the type of literature and the type of authors that I worked with. And I got experience not just running my own team, but working with volunteers, working with a committee that helped guide the programming and working with some experienced people who'd done it for years. So I learned a lot there. helped take events to the next level, took the book festival to the next level. We brought people like John Lewis in as the keynote, Joyce Carol Oates, Roxane Gay. We had Richard Blanco, who was the inaugural poet for Obama, I think way back then when we liked inaugurations. And so I really got some great experience. And then I was there for 3 years. At the end of 2015, I left, and this opportunity at Midtown Alliance came up. And here I work with almost 400 organizations, ranging from small businesses, street level businesses, to our largest employers, most of the office buildings and most of the residential buildings, and keep them connected to the work that we do as a business improvement district, through events, through communications. And it's really cool because I get to work with such a wide range of people here, and a wide range of different organizations.
Yeah, and that's been my experience, just going to the meetings for Midtown Alliance and all of that, and seeing, the neighborhood updates and just connecting with people in the neighborhood is fantastic. And you do meet people from all different walks of life and all different types of businesses and all of that. And it's a wonderful experience. As far as, like, obviously, as you mentioned there, times have changed, and now we can be as gay people, as lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer people can be out and about much more than when Outwrite started in the early 90s. But what do you think is the importance still, even though that's the case, some recent developments notwithstanding, that is the case, what is the importance, I should say, of LGBTQ plus spaces, specific spaces, like you established it outright? What's the importance of those today?
I think it's very important, and it's unfortunate that we don't have as many of them. Of course, with the internet, people do have options to learn about themselves and connect with others. But good God, what's going on today in this country and around the world with anti-trans bias and all LGBTQ bias, I think that it is more important than ever that we support the spaces we have. It's harder to find an exclusive LGBTQ restaurant. There's not that many bars, and of course, people go out less. We have nice things at home, but it's important that we have them. It would be great if we had an LGBTQ community center in Atlanta, which we haven't had in years and years. There is a group working on that. And it'd be great if we had another LGBTQ bookstore and coffee house. I think people need it. People need to meet with others. They need to see, especially now when there's so many attacks on us with the new administration coming in. It's unbelievable how they're trying to erase all minorities, and they will have some success. So visibility is going to be key. I think we are all trying to regroup and figure out how we're going to live in this new world. But yeah, I'm still buying lotto tickets every week, and if I win, I'm opening I'm going to do Outright version 2. So
I love it.
But I won $2 last week. So
hey, there you go. It's smart,
Yeah.
It's so funny. I thought you were going to say there for a second, if I win the lottery, I'm moving to, Bora Bora or something.
No, I don't think that's me. I really would love to find a way to continue to get back to the community.
Yeah.
I see so many people every week that say, "I miss your bookstore. I love your bookstore," and the truth is, they don't have anywhere to go and get that type of thing. Look, I think what happened with me is there was a Memorial Day or Labor Day, and I had the day off, and I just wanted to go out somewhere during the day. And I mean, I don't even think there were any bars open at that time. So going to a place where you can meet people, where you're traveling in town, it can be your first place to go, where you can learn what's going on. I think it's important.
Yeah. And there have been, other places right there in Midtown, I feel like, that you could go during the daytime that have closed as well. At Henry's, which was a staple just down, a block or so down from 10th and Piedmont.
That was a heartbreaker.
Yeah.
So it's Einstein's, but Henry's was just that place you could always go to.
At the time, by the way, when Joe's and Einstein's closed, we lived just in the little tiny apartment building that's right behind where Einstein's was. And it was like, and Joe's was another one of those places. Like when I would come into Midtown as a young person, it was Outright, Joe's. And then then later on we would go to Burkhart's or Blake's or wherever. But it was, that was another heartbreaker as well. So yeah, you're absolutely right. There are less of those spaces, especially those sort of daytime spaces where people can go.
Right. And let's not nighttime spaces. Look, when we opened the at the corner of Piedmont and 10th, we'd have people that would come for the weekend. They would come on Thursday night. They would come to the bookstore. They would spend the weekends partying. And Monday was one of our busiest days because people would stay over Sunday night. They go out to the tea dance or wherever they go. And then Monday was their day to come by the bookstore and pick up things they had eyed and the books. I can see get something to drink and take pictures. So we were really busy. And when they restricted the hours of the bars, that was another thing that helped speed the decline of the bookstore.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So many different aspects. We talk about like, online retail and all of that being a thing, but that, of course, not the only obstacle that you sort of had to overcome. What would you say to any sort of, young LGBTQ plus entrepreneurs, maybe who are trying to either, they've either started their own business or they're looking to maybe establish their own business and kind of get started in this world? Do you have any advice sort of, from your years of experience that you would share with that?
Yeah. Well, first, don't quit the debt. Don't get him that. But there is just a ton of people who want to and need to support a business like that can give advisement on the best ways to do it. And don't get frustrated because there's people that won't support you because you're out and proud, because there's a heck of a lot more people who are going to support you because you're out and proud.
That's absolutely right. Especially, I feel like these days, even with all of the setbacks recently that you have mentioned and the struggles that are still to come on that front, we are still a long way from where we were. But, we've always had to fight battles along the way. And I feel like maybe we were sort of lulled into this false sense of security that things were only going to keep going in one direction. But, there are new battles to be fought. But at the same time, not only are there, people in the public who are going to be supportive, but there are people in people's, personal lives who will be extremely supportive as well. So yeah, having that support system is huge.
Yeah, I think it's really important. It's really critical.
Yeah. And it's funny because, we were talking just a minute before we started recording here. And, obviously this is a show where, talk about finances primarily focused on retirement planning for LGBTQ plus folks, because I always say everybody's situation is different. And no matter who you are, where you come from, who you love, how you identify, or how much money you have, you deserve to have a retirement that you can take pride in. That's why the show exists. And that's why I do what I do. Can you talk about kind of the little laugh that we had before we started about, you were like, it's funny because I'm coming on the show where you talk about retirement a lot, but retirement just sort of kind of happened for you, right? It's not anything that you ever really had a plan for.
Right. It's not something, I think I've lived my life. It's not one of those people who went to school and said, I know what I want to do when I get out. It kind of came into place. And when I opened the bookstore, is not something that I plan to do. But after we closed the bookstore, I was able to put together some plans for retirement. I have some stuff. I have a pension from when I was NCR, which helps a little bit. But I've been able to do some investments that make when that time I retire a little more attainable. Both myself and my husband have put our heads together on that.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, you do have that working, of course, in your favor, and I would say that is wonderful. Of course, that is you're in the minority on that one, because I think a lot of people do really need that formal plan. I think most people need that formal plan. But hey, you had obviously been very fortunate and very, I guess, stewardly. I don't know if that's even a word, but with your own particular personal finances in these last several years, and have made a way where you can actually enjoy a comfortable retirement in the years to come. So that is wonderful. Well, Philip, just about running out of time here, but I mean, is there anything else that you wanted to share, or about your journey in business or life in general, or words of wisdom, or anything else that you want to share with the listeners?
Well, I think what I said before, don't let fear choose your path, is pretty important. It was written by a couple of authors. We had a author wall where we had people sign the wall every time they signed a book. And so two of the authors, Joyce Murdoch and, I forget her partner's name. They were one of the first outriders at the Detroit Free Press, and they put that on the wall. And I take that to heart very well. But I think I've summed it up. You got to be out and proud. You've got to surround yourself with people that are going to support you along the way, and always be looking for what the next thing is.
That's right. I mean, you really do. And I love that quote, don't let fear choose your path. That's so important, and especially important, I think, today, due to many reasons that we've discussed.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Philip Rafshoon is an entrepreneur and currently with the Midtown Alliance in Atlanta. Philip, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. This has been great. I've learned loving more about Outwrite and your other business and career adventures, and just hearing all of that, and hearing your wisdom to share with the audience as well. Really do appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed talking with you.